Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. I'm your host, Jerred Moon. The Garage Gym Athlete Podcast is a result of my desire to build better humans, unequivocal coaches, and autonomous athletes. I've spent the last several years obsessing over program design, nutrition, and every other way you can optimize human performance. This podcast distills the latest scientific research with what I've learned and blends it with the not-so-scientific field of mental toughness. We are here to build you into a dangerously effective athlete. If you enjoy this podcast, you can find out more about our training at garagegymathlete.com. And if you want to pursue more into the field of coaching and programming, head to endof3fitness.com. Thanks for listening. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Dylan Mullenix. Man, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. No Joe today, but you know what? Might be better without him. So let's get into it, man. Give us the basic intro, what you do for a living, how you train, where you're from.
Sure. So Dylan Mullenix, I'm 40 years old. I live in Ankeny, Iowa, which is a suburb of Des Moines. I'm married. I've got an 11-year-old son, almost 2-year-old daughter. For work, I'm an urban planner by education and training, and I'm employed by a small government agency called the Des Moines Area Metropolitan Planning Organization. I'm the assistant director there, and I train in my basement.
That's awesome. So you plan cities?
Yeah.
That's
it's not as
awesome.
simple as that, but yeah.
Oh, no, I know that. Yeah, but it actually sounds incredibly complex, like all the things that you need to think about to be able to run, just on a small scale. They're trying to put in a small subdivision close to where I live, and just the amount of things that I probably wouldn't have thought of, from drainage to all these other big picture things. I'm like, oh wow, that's quite a process. A lot more involved than I realized.
Yeah, listening to you go through your build of your EO3 center and all the permitting and stuff like that, it's yep, that's stuff I've had to do in the past. I'm on the other side telling you to do that. Sometimes,
right.
not right now, but used to be. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, how's the basement? Does it get pretty cold in Iowa?
It does, and that's why I'm in a basement. As the garage, first of all, I just don't want to give up any garage space, but also just the weather swings. It gets really hot in the summer, it gets really cold in the winter, and I know there's people that do it, but I've got the space in the basement, so I figured why not do that.
Yeah, why not, man? So what is the setup in the basement?
So I've got a pretty, what I think is a pretty good setup. I've got a Titan rack and, barbells and bumper plates. I've got a couple different barbells, some regular ones. I've got some specialty ones that I don't use a whole lot and probably need to offload some equipment. Adjustable dumbbells, adjustable kettlebells, sandbags, slam ball, plyo box, bands, jump rope, that kind of thing. My most recent purchase, I think, it's been a while, is the Scout Hyper. Nice. So I'm enjoying that. And we just moved to this house about 6 weeks ago. And the previous house also had a basement gym, but it wasn't big enough where I could leave that unfolded all the time. And this one is bigger, so I can leave it unfolded, which is really nice. And it gets a lot more use now. In terms of cardio, I've got the Concept 2 rower. We've got an old elliptical that my wife won't let me get rid of. I don't use it, but when we moved, we also had a treadmill. I got rid of that, but she wouldn't let the elliptical machine go, thinking she's going to use it someday, which probably won't. And we also have a bike trainer, like a smart bike trainer. So it's a pretty nice setup, I think.
Yeah, sounds like you got basically everything you need. What was the big reason behind starting a garage gym for you?
For me, and this is maybe my third or fourth iteration, if you count the previous house, and I've kind of gone in fits and starts of going to a gym versus working from home. But really, if I had to boil it down, you can blame swimmers. My wife is a swimmer. And so we were always debating of whose turn was it to go to the gym. Working out in the morning is when we prefer to go. Just with kids after work wasn't really doable for us. And so it was just a constant, is it your turn to go to the gym? Is it my turn? Well, swimming, they only allow so many days for swimming, and only hours that the lanes are open. And so it was just, it was doable, but we just constantly had that struggle. And then I'll get into this maybe a little bit later with my training history, but I had shoulder surgery. And as I rehabbed from that, I was turned back loose to training, and a new, kind of like a Y, but not an official Y, but it was a nice big facility like that on a local community college campus. So I started going there. and started out in like early summer. It was great. No one there for nice new equipment and everything. And then in fall, the students all came back. So it got a little more crowded. It was manageable. And then a few months later, the swim team was in there. And
Hmm.
they weren't in like the weight area, but they were in the locker room. And it was like the high school swim team, 30 teenage boys doing teenage boy things, hogging the showers and the benches and I just got fed up and said, you know what, balancing the stuff with my wife and now dealing with these kids in the locker room, I can just do this from home. And I've got a buddy at work who has a home gym himself and had been whispering in my ear for years, like, just get a rack in your basement and it'll all be good. So I finally walked into work one day and was like, okay, tell me what I need. Just pulled up the websites for the equipment companies, like, just tell me what rack I need and what barbell. And he helped me put it together. And I don't think I'm ever probably going to go back.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Freaking swimmers.
I know.
Caused the whole thing. That's really cool. So let's get into your training history a little bit. You mentioned the shoulder thing, but like, let's go back. Like, how far do we need to go back? Different sports activities you've been in.
Yeah, like a lot of people, I did a lot of activities growing up in high school and stuff. And I was mainly a runner. I did track and cross country, basketball and baseball, but I never had a weightlifting background to me. All the football players lifted weights, and I'd go in there and I'd screw around, but I stuck mostly to machines. I was a really tall, skinny kid growing up, so I was kind of embarrassed by how much I could lift and everything. It wasn't until my senior year, my track coach asked the assistant track coach, who was the football coach, to give me a workout program. It was like basic, do 3 sets of 10 of, these 3 or 4 things, but it was all upper body stuff with the thinking that I ran a lot. I didn't need lower body. So after that, it was kind of just off and on doing magazine workouts, getting into running, getting burnt out, going too fast, too soon, kind of like you talked about in your recent webinar. I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, a Y opened up right next to my work. And so I started going. I was still doing magazine workouts, but then the buddy of mine that helped me put together my home gym said, hey, you should try something like starting strength or 5x5. So I started doing that. And that was really the first time I had done really like compound lifting and having a progression to my training and that kind of stuff. The problem though was consistency. Just again, with my wife, I could only get to the gym maybe 3 days a week. It just wasn't doable. She got a new job where she had to be at work at like 7 a.m. So morning going to the gym just wasn't in the cards anymore. I had to get my son ready for school and that kind of thing. So started working out from home, just in the basement, doing, just body weight stuff, getting those, 10-minute apps, on the phone that give you a little body weight routine and
Right. Yeah.
and doing that. And it was fine. And I got to be consistent with, like every morning I'd go down there. That's when I did use my elliptical and, kind of alternate back and forth. And then, so this is like 2017. I just kind of, I guess I didn't, I don't know. I just hit an age and I had some stuff going on professionally where I just kind of was taking a look at myself and literally taking a look at myself. Cause I was in like I was named to like a 40 under 40 type thing for our area. And I was in a leadership thing and had a lot of pictures like in newspaper and social media. And I just did not like the way I looked. And I was in a leadership class talking to someone, and we had an exercise of like, what do you value and what's your personality, that kind of stuff. And I was like, I value health and wellness and fitness. And I maybe even making this up, but the person I was talking to kind of gave me a look like, really? You don't look like it. And I just felt like such a fraud and a hypocrite and stuff. And I was like, it's time to get stuff together. I'd been working out, but the nutrition part wasn't there. And I had, all the medical records are online now. And I started going back through, every time you go to the doctor, they weigh you. And every year my weight went up by like 1 or 2 pounds. Not a big jump from year to year, but over like a 10 or 12 year span, it's like, man, I've put on like 25 pounds. Okay, enough's enough. And I started, just decided to get my stuff together, and I had been reading Tim Ferriss's book, 4 Hour Body, for some reason. Yeah. And more so, it's like a shortcut. Here's how to get jacked. And I didn't really pay attention to the nutrition stuff, but I went back and was like, oh, maybe there's something to that. And I started kind of following his, what he calls slow carb diet. And that started working for me, and started dropping weight, and eventually got into like, counting calories, keeping a food diary, and just being real more disciplined with that aspect of it. And I lost a lot of weight. I was maybe 205, 210. And by the time I got done, I was just a hair under 170. So
That's awesome.
that was going well. And it just got me thinking like, okay, there's something to this, it's the diet and the training. And I alluded to this earlier, but as I was doing all my body weight stuff around then, I developed some shoulder pain, went to the doctor, had an MRI, had a torn labrum. And I had a previous surgery that year, like a 5-year-old, I had my tonsils taken out. And so I'd already met my deductible. I was like, screw it, let's just take care of the surgery. I don't want to deal with going to rehab, and I'm just maybe not the smartest thing, but I just went ahead and did the surgery. And then when I got out and got turned back loose to training, that's where I went to the gym where the swimmers annoyed me. Started back up with 5x5 there. Eventually switched to a guy named Mike Matthews. I don't know if anybody's talked about him before, but he does Bigger, Leaner, Stronger is a program he has, and a book that goes along with it and everything. And I liked it fine, and I continued doing that even after I started my home gym. But eventually just kind of got stalled out on that. There was some equipment that program called for, leg presses, and I didn't have that, and I got tired of trying to sub everything. So jumped around a little bit, went back to doing 5x5. And I, around this time, my daughter was born, and I was up really late one night watching, feeding her, watching stuff on Netflix. And I came across the Louis Simmons West Side versus the World documentary.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this conjugate thing looks really interesting. So I went out, and I think this might've been the first time I came across, or one of the first times I came across, your work in EO3, because you had an article about the best strength training, and that was on there. And I was considering Wendler. I don't know what I'll do. So I found some random conjugate program, and I really liked that, just the variety of things, and had more conditioning built into it. And anyway, I got done with that, and I was like, well, now what do I do? I've been doing one thing. Now I found this other thing. I'm still not sure if my nutrition's quite where it needs to be. Like, I'm committed to this enough that I'm willing to pay for something, right? I'm willing to seek out coaching, make sure I'm doing this correctly, because I want to do this for the long haul. And I talked to some random online trainer people, and they quoted me like $500 a month. And I was like, there's no way I can afford that. And they're like, well, if you were doing this in person, it'd be $1,000. I'm like, that's awesome. If you can afford that,
Doesn't matter either way.
Yeah. But here's this other thing. And that's where I'd come across Garage Gym Athlete, and it's like, wow, why not give it a try? And I'd seen it before, and I think I was just intimidated. There was more conditioning in it. It wasn't just the 3 compound movements. There was a lot of stuff in there. And as I looked at it again, I was like, I think I could do this, and so I started doing it, and I don't see myself going anywhere else now. I don't want to program hop anymore.
That's awesome.
That's what brought me here. Long-winded tale.
Well, I'm glad we got you. And if you enjoy the conjugate method, then you typically will like our stuff, if you're interested in that kind of thing. So that's really cool, man. So you have accomplished quite a bit. What do you have any current goals that you're chasing?
Yeah, when I started Garage Gym Athlete, and even when I was doing stuff before, it was really thinking like, oh, how do I get my maxes in these lifts and stuff like that? And as I've gone through stuff, and I think maybe I've just drank the Kool-Aid that really the daily over decades is a better approach. So, my goal right now is just to keep doing this and doing it smartly, not going too big, too fast, being well-rounded, all that kind of stuff. I turned 40 this year, and I'm 15 years into my work at where I work, and we're on a pension program. So basically in another 15 years, I can retire. So just like these weird things, I'm 40, I'm halfway through my career. Let's make sure we can maintain this, because I've got things I want to do in life. One of my big goals, bucket list things, is I want to through hike the Appalachian Trail. And I probably won't get to that anytime soon, but I want to make sure that I'm ready whenever that opportunity comes about. So that's kind of the big term thing. A couple more immediate is I've got into zone 2 running, and I've really enjoyed that. And I know I've got a lot more work to go, and kind of learning. In the most recent interview you did with someone, they were talking about it's not the mileage, it's the time you put into it.
The time, yeah.
And I've kind of discovered that too. So that's really what I'm focusing on. So zone 2, and then it's been a long time since I've done any sort of competitions, and I want to get back into that. Whether it's a 5K or an obstacle course race, something, I think up to the point where I'd feel comfortable to do something like that and take that on. So there's one here in the Des Moines area that's called the Living History Farms Race, and it's supposedly the largest cross-country race in the country. It's like 7,000 people in it, and you go over creeks, through creeks and over hay bales, and so it's sort of obstacle coursey, but it's a cross-country run. And I've always wanted to do it. I've never done it, so I think it's maybe about time.
Yeah, man, do that, and then we're gonna get you back on the podcast and talk about how it went. But I think you have a really good approach and mindset to all this stuff. And I mean, zone 2, just setting you up, a lot of that setting you up for, the next 15 years. Like I just did the O3 5K this week with my father-in-law, and we had a time cap at 40 minutes. And he's close to 60, and he got 5 full rounds in 40 minutes. And I was like, that's respectable,
Yeah.
like I want to make sure I'm doing that, when I'm close to that age. And it's just looking at how do we reverse engineer that. And I think you're on a good path, man. So overall, how do you like training in your basement?
I really, really love it. The previous house I had, the only 2 things that I have problems with in a basement gym, one was the overhead height. And I had that issue with my old house where doing box jumps and overhead press, I could do it, but you really got to aim to make sure you're not banging your head on the floor joists and stuff. This house has a higher ceiling, so that's not a problem anymore. The other thing, and it doesn't come up all that often, but just being able to do quick transitions to like going outside to run is just kind of a pain in the butt, where that's where I envy the garage gym folks, where you can just run out the door and away you go. It's doable. But especially in the winter, if doing Murph or something, you gotta run, and you gotta come in and strip down and do all the calisthenics and get bundled back up and out you go. It just takes time, and it's kind of annoying tracking crap through the house, but it's a small complaint. It doesn't come up all that often. So like I said, I don't think I'll ever go back.
That's great, man. You ever run into any like struggles with staying motivated, training alone or anything like that?
No, I've never been someone that has like a training partner or anything like that. So it works for me. The one thing that I just kind of have in the back of my mind is I've been doing all of my garage gym athlete stuff. I'm finishing my 5th cycle. So I started last summer. It's all been during COVID times, and I've been working from home. So I haven't done it while I'm doing the normal 8 to 5 job, right? So it's easy for me to do it now. I can just find time, find an hour a day to make it work. That's my only, I'm not concerned about it, but I just know it's not going to be this easy once everything kind of hopefully goes back to normal. But otherwise, no, otherwise I don't see a lot of issues.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. Well, here it comes. I want to hear it. What's the hardest workout you've ever done?
I don't have a great answer to this compared to some other people have, but the thing that pops in my mind, and it might not sound like it was that crazy of a workout or anything, but I'll go back to high school. Like I said, I was a runner, and my main sport was the 400-meter hurdles. And I didn't have an issue so much with the hurdle part of it, but it was, doing an all-out sprint for 400 meters, I, get burnt out. And our coach, we were doing a lot of, we called them repeat 200s, but 200-meter intervals was something we do a lot. And as I got to my senior year, the way Iowa worked at the time was kind of goofy. You didn't go to like a district meet and then a sectionals and make state. It's like if you had one of the top times in the state throughout the year, they took like the top 24 times and that was it. So you could run it one time, first meet of the year, as long as it held up, you're good. So I was in that mix, but I knew it was shaky to hold. And I had a race and I did a pretty good job. And coach was like, that's what we need. And I was like, I just looked him in the eyes, like, I need more 200-meter intervals. And he kind of gave me a look like, all right, buddy, your funeral. And so one of the next practices, since I was one of the few people on the cusp of making the state, he just put all the other runners as rabbits for me. So I'm doing every one of them and chasing fresh legs every time. And it was made clear that no one should beat me. So I don't know how many intervals we did of it, but it's like, you got to do it in 30 seconds. You have 30 seconds rest. You're right back on it, or whatever the time was. And it was one of the few times I've ever puked doing a workout. So that's
That
why it really
sounds
stands
brutal.
out to me. It's like I said, we do 30/30s all the time, in Garage Gym Athlete, and it's like this isn't so bad when you can kind of go at your own pace. But man, if you're chasing someone, you've got a coach riding your butt. That makes it a whole different ball game.
Yeah, that brings it up a few levels there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, in your opinion, what's the best activity for building mental toughness?
So I don't have it might not be an activity per se, but it's kind of just a way of thinking that I've come across recently, which is Stoicism, the Stoic
Yeah.
philosophy. And, I really kind of have you guys to thank for this. You covered the Ross Edgley book, Art of Resilience, and sounded interesting. And I read it, and he talked a lot about Stoicism and his Stoic sports philosophy, his spin on it. And I was like, what is this? And when I got done, I Googled it and started reading into it. And it's like, this really makes a lot of sense to me. And, there's a lot of stuff in there that I think just lends itself to a better, in my opinion, better mental outlook on things. And whether it's training or just everyday life, just understanding what's in your control and what's not, understanding that your thoughts are really what, events themselves are not good or bad. It's how you think of them that really
Right.
do that. And there's a whole host of things. People have mentioned journaling, and that's a big part of it. That's something that's worked for me too. So it's just a whole umbrella of things that I think fall under that stoicism umbrella. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I mean that's like the pinnacle of mental toughness right there is deep dive into stoicism and actually being able to implement it in all the facets. Ryan Holiday's written a lot about
Yeah.
that stuff and done a good job taking what are fairly complex texts and like breaking them down. But it's a great philosophy, man.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. I've kind of went down a rabbit hole and I haven't quite come out yet. So it's been fun.
Well, if you could only have one piece of equipment to train with for the rest of your life, what would it be?
I go back and forth on this. I was thinking, what can I get the most use out of, do the most variety of things. And it's like either one of those like power towers where you can do pull-ups and dips and that kind of stuff, or maybe just rings. I think you can do all that stuff with rings too, and it's a little simpler. So I'd probably say rings at this point. I'm not great at them, but I can tell there's a reason they're difficult, and they do a good job. So I'll go with rings.
Awesome. And if we could grant you any piece of equipment on the planet, what would it be? You have a pretty nice setup.
Yeah, I have a nice setup, and I don't have a lot more room. If it was anything in the world, I'd say probably a true form, because why not? More realistically,
that makes those transitions easier.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, let's stick with true form.
Awesome, man.
I've never used one, but they sound great.
I mean, they're great and they're awful at the same time.
Yeah.
So what is your best advice for all the garage gym athletes out there listening right now?
I would say, thinking for people in the garage gym athlete programming, take advantage of the various resources that are available. So, you have the Facebook group with all the athletes, you have access to the coaches, you have the podcast, you have the website. There's just a ton of information there. And don't get overwhelmed, but, dig into that, because I think if you really explore it and understand why things are happening and all that kind of stuff, that's take advantage. You guys have been great. I've submitted questions that you've answered, on the podcast and stuff, and it's, take advantage. So that'd be one of them. And then with the Facebook group, keep in mind you're just competing with yourself. There's a lot of studs on there, and it can be intimidating sometimes, but just use that as a resource, use that for inspiration, but don't think you have to compare yourself to everybody. So those would be my two big pieces of advice.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate that. I also appreciate your time and for being a garage gym athlete, being a dedicated member, man. Thanks for being a part of the community.
Yeah, thank you.
Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. If you want to learn more, go to garagegymathlete.com. You can learn about our training. Let us send you a copy of our book, The Garage Gym Athlete, or you can even get featured on the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Thanks for listening.